Of the record. All you.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Mortgage interest rates have remained fairly stable and flat as we move into a Monday. So not a lot of exciting news from that standpoint. However, what is exciting is that next week the Fed has their yearly symposium in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Usually what they do during this symposium is they talk about where they were last year versus where they are this year. And they talk through different numbers and different variables that are going to predict where they're going to go in the next 12 months. So interestingly enough, we want to take a look at the full picture to kind of get an idea of why everyone's saying that the Fed is going to be dropping interest rates in September. So I'm going to share a screenshot with you and kind of go through those numbers so that we can kind of get an idea of what exactly is happening. So this is a comparative of August 23rd of 2023 versus August 24th of 2024. And these numbers are very important because there's a lot of difference between these first four variables that work into the mortgage interest rates. And also there is nothing changing on the Fed fund rate. And that's why this meeting is super important to predict what's going to happen in September. So the first number is your core PCE, or your personal consumption expenditure. Basically, how much of your disposable income are you spending on things? 2023, 4.3%, 2024, 2.6. This basically means that we are feeling the pinch. We are saying we don't have a lot of discretionary income. Everything is costing us more. We're going to stop our spending and curb our spending as consumers in the US. The next one is going to be your CPI, your consumer price index. Not only, this one is a measure of how much we're spending, this one is a measure of how much those things are going to cost us. So in other words, 2023, we had a 4.7% of a CPI. Now we're down to 3.2. So both of these things indicate that we are feeling that pinch. The most important indicator in this entire chart is going to be the third thing, which is the unemployment rate. We went 3.5 last year. We're all the way up to 4.3. So that's been steadily rising. That is the number one indicator that the Fed needs to drop that interest rate in order to get people back into the labor market, get people back into spending, get the economy regenerated or rejuvenated from that standpoint. Interestingly enough, the 10-year Treasury, which is what the mortgage interest rates are based on, went from 4.15 to under that 4% level that I was talking about last week to 3.9. This is important as well because it allows us to see that there has been some improvement in mortgage interest rates, but not enough to make the Fed drop their rate at the 5.375. So you guys can understand that where all of these things are starting to push and indicate that we need to get the Fed, or the Fed needs to drop that mortgage interest rate. So that is why they're saying that, at the very least in September, we're going to see a 25 basis point drop. We're hoping actually more for a 50 basis point drop. If this unemployment number goes up again this month, if this core PCE number again goes down this month, we are going to be pushing, or the Fed is going to feel the pressure to lower that interest rate, not only by 25 basis points, but by 50 basis points. Now, another important factor that's coming into this, and this is interesting because when the Fed meets, right before they meet, they get the Bureau of Labor Market Statistics, which basically talks about, it makes corrective measures to the unemployment rate, the jobs reports that we've been seeing throughout the year, how many jobs are available, et cetera. The Bureau of Labor Statistics will downward revise jobs for the April 23rd to March 24th period by up to 1 million. In other words, their numbers the entire year have been way off base as to how many jobs were actually produced. And they are going to be downward revising that number by 1 million. In other words, we thought that we had all these jobs out there, but it turns out the number of jobs is actually off by 1 million. This is going to be a huge miss. And it's going to put pressure on the Fed to really lower that interest rate and get that interest rate going and lowering it. So there are just some things that are interesting as we go into next week and see what happens with that Fed rate, especially during the September meeting. So this is a really important next month, next 3-4 weeks for us to watch those mortgage interest rates and for you guys to keep track of what's happening. I'm going to do my best to do video after video after video to kind of keep track of what is happening with the labor, with the, not only these meetings, but also with the mortgage interest rates. So you guys have content out there that you can share and is available to you, or you can rebrand it, redo it, whatever you guys want to do. So that's kind of my accountability commitment this week, is to do as many videos as possible talking about what's happening on the daily basis as we lead up to that September 18th meeting. So that's what's going on with mortgage interest rates. Again, they're flat right now. We're really just anticipating that meeting with the Fed next week and their symposium and seeing where they're going to do it. I've heard through different economists and different people that I watch and do research on, that the Fed is going to have to make adjustments to the mortgage or to their rate up to 200 basis points. In other words, 2% from where they're at now, in order to get things back under control. So that's kind of the target market in the next 12 months, is to say 200 basis points, but we got to start in September with at least one small adjustment at the very least, hoping for a bigger one at that 50 basis points. So, or 0.5%. So we're kind of just hopeful for that. So we'll wait and see. But again, with your clients who are on the fence, with your clients who have said, I want to sell, or maybe had a listing for a while and pulled it off the market because it wasn't selling, make sure you're keeping track of those clients. Make sure you're keeping in contact with them, because as the Fed makes their announcement in September, it's going to be, I don't know, haywire. It's going to be just kind of this crazy time that you want to get ahead of and make sure you're in touch with your clients now, so that as things progress and as there's more buyers entering that market, that you have the opportunity to get those listings. As far as mortgages on the street. So I've had a very interesting week last week as far as questions surrounding, hey, I have a home. I want to purchase another home and I want to go non-contingent. But according to the debt to income ratios, according to what I can afford, I cannot afford both payments. However, I have a good equity position on my home and I may need to do a bridge loan. Do you have alternatives, or do you have people you can recommend? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because there are some alternatives to bridge lending that can help with the debt to income ratios and can help with clients who are positioned in such a manner that they want to be able to not offer non-contingent on the home that they're purchasing. I had mentioned a little bit about this before. I think it was a couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago, about talking about alternative lending, but I wanted to get a little bit more into it because I've gotten so many questions. And again, as we get into the interest rates dropping and more competition in the market, it's going to be essential that your buyers who previously had to go contingent find a way to be able to go non-contingent, so that they can be more competitive when they're making their offers, because there is going to be that competition out there. So if you have a client, and my side, a client who is available or can qualify for conventional lending, and they have a home to sell, the guideline states that if they have a home to sell, they can get an accepted purchase agreement on that home that they're selling. It doesn't matter, as long as it's closing within 60 days of when they buy the other home. We do not need to count that home in their debt to income ratios. On the other side, the person buying their home either has to be buying it for cash, or they have to have a loan approval on it. Okay. This is important because it allows us to say, okay, we understand that you're purchasing your home September 1st. You just got an accepted purchase agreement on the home that you're departing from, but it's not closing till October 1st. What can we do? So with that being said, that's all fine and dandy, except where does the client get their down payment then? How are they going to access the equity in that home that they're departing before purchasing, while they're trying to purchase this one before, but they need that money in order to buy the other property, because they don't have a lot of other assets sitting around for down payment. Now, that's always been kind of oh, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? Alternatives in the past have always been, and still work, are second mortgages on their departure residence, bridge loans on their departure residence. But both of these things require us to use that payment, or to count that payment in the debt to income ratios. And that doesn't always work for the client. So there is a third alternative, which is called knock lending. And what knock lending does is it writes a purchase agreement on the property that they're departing. It advances the equity in the home as the earnest money. So in other words, let's just say a person's home is worth $400,000. They've got a $200,000 mortgage. Knock Lending will come in and purchase that property and give them $100,000 in earnest money for that property. They take that $100,000, they put it onto the equity of the new home, and they do this in such a way where it's 0 payments and 0% interest. The seller has 6 months in that contract with Knock Lending to sell that home. So as a realtor, it does not disrupt your ability to earn commission on that listing. It gives you a timeline of 6 months to sell that property. At the end of 6 months, if that home isn't sold, Knock Lending will purchase the home at a reduced price. So it helps in the idea that that buyer now is all of a sudden a non-contingent buyer because they have the equity from the home, they have access to the equity from the home, and we do not need to count a payment in the debt to income ratios, and therefore they can easily qualify for the new home that they're going to purchase as if their home had already sold. So it's a really nice opportunity for a seller who doesn't want to rent out their property, who may or may not get that accepted purchase agreement in time, and doesn't screw the realtor out of their commission either. It kind of helps you guys get paid as well. So it's a good alternative. I have a client who's using it. The fees for it are going to be 2.25% of the purchase price or of the sale price. But other than that, and about $1,800 in title fees, depending on your state. But other than that, there is no other fees, no other interest associated with that property. So it can be a good alternative for someone in an equity position where all the numbers are going to make sense and they can front load their down payment on the new home. And I can then confidently send them out as a non-contingent pre-approval, and you guys can confidently help them make offers that way. So it's a really good alternative. Like I said, everybody wins. It is a little bit on the expensive side, 2.25%, but if we can work that into the numbers and into the sale price, we're going to be a lot, you guys are going to be a lot happier and a lot faster and get those clients what they need in a timely manner.
I love that you said that too, because a lot of people are like, oh, 2.25, and there's options, there's opportunities. So don't let that kind of stop you in your tracks. Real quick, Nikki, we do have Taz on the live stream, wanted to ask this question. Wondering, and this goes back to the unemployment looks like, don't they also not account for people unemployed 1 year plus in their numbers? Also, is a rate being lowered good considering inflation, lack of jobs, and consumer spending going to really change anything?
That's a great question. So remember that inflation number is made up a lot of shelter. That's a huge portion of the inflation number. So as we think about shelter and how people buy and sell homes, how people rent, how people, move around in the market, that's a major contributor to that inflation. When we see the downward pressure on inflation, the only way to keep it going downward is to stimulate that housing market. That is, I don't know the exact percentage, but I want to say it's like 82% of that inflation number, something crazy like that, is made up of those shelter and how people move in and out of that housing market. So will lowering interest rates help stimulate the housing market? Absolutely. Will that help with inflation? In theory, yes. So as the Fed lowers that rate, that puts more downward pressure on interest rates, which again, remember, 1% change in mortgage interest rates brings 5 million new buyers into the market that are all of a sudden qualified. So on the inflation side, absolutely. I can't remember the first part of the question.
She said, do they also not account for people unemployed 1 year plus in their numbers?
That is correct. Yep. So that's part of that revision number. When we're getting that 12-month history, is part of that revision number is saying, hey, there's been people that are unemployed for a long amount of time here. And normally we will see revisions by about 200 to 300,000, which is considered normal and standard, but by 1 million is a huge amount. I mean, it's a huge miss, and you kind of just sit there and you say, okay, the Fed rate has remained unchanged over the last 12 months. And all these things have been happening that are pushing for them to lower that rate so that we can continue to stimulate the housing market and change things from an economic standpoint.
Yeah. Great question.
Great question.
Anyone else? I mean, this is amazing. I mean, even just the slides, if you don't have enough to talk about this week for social content, go back and rewatch this recording. It's in the live stream on Workplace for EXP, or you can find it on my YouTube channel. Fantastic. Anyone on the call? I see a bunch of people that have questions here from the Zoom that want to jump on and talk with Nikki. Wealth of knowledge and information. I don't see anyone coming off mute, so come off mute if you'd like to. Nikki, that's amazing. I mean, so much information in the knock program. I think that's a good, I had heard about that before and honestly forgot about it. So thanks so much for bringing that up too. There's just so many options, regardless of where your buyer's at. You know, that's why I love to think about us as realtors. We're really, again, consultants, and we're also like, find out what their real estate goals are. So again, it's starting with the end in mind and working backwards and working with Nikki to figure out, okay, this is the goal. This is what they want to do. If not now, what does that roadmap look like? What needs to happen? A plus B plus C will equal the end result. So that's where I started with so many of my buyers when I was a buyer's agent, is I would meet with them regardless of if they said, you know, we're waiting a year, we're waiting 2 years, probably, you know, after this fall. My only and one and only response was, I'm so glad we connected today. Now's the perfect time for us to start talking. Year out, 2 years out, let's get on a call with Nikki and find out what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And now we have the gift of time where we can put a roadmap together, we can put a plan together so that when you are ready, we're ready. And you're not just starting the process. Can you see how that would benefit you?
Yeah.
Let's do it. 3 months out, it's go time. You know, so really think about that and ask the good questions, ask the open-ended questions that find out really what their goals are so that you can help them reach their real estate goals. That really is what we want for our clients, and by our fiduciary duties, what we owe them. And there's so many different ways to do it. So I just love everything you said today in so
And
many
I think that knock lending is a very good example of how different alternatives can float in and out of the market based on necessity.
Yeah.
We have to be able, and you guys already know this, but it's just a prime example of how we need to be able to adapt to the market and overcome some of the things that are happening that are out of our control. How can we still be of service to our clients? How can we still find solutions to their real estate goals, things of that nature that are market specific for the time being, and then help them into the future plan. You know, not only does it center around mortgage interest rates and what they're going to do over the next 12 months and how we structure the loan on that side, but finding ways for them to move into a home, you know, as an alternative so that they can get ahead of that curve, ahead of the people that are going to be rushing towards the market once those interest rates drop, and really kind of gives an example of, yeah, we have to be able to be flexible and adapt and overcome is kind of just the common theme over the last, well, I was going to say over the last 12 months, but it's really over the last 24 months has been adapt and overcome, you know, and figure out how to be strong in this market and really how to figure out how to help people and what are those alternatives and how can we be knowledgeable and upfront about all of them that are available.
Love it. Absolutely.
Okay. Hi, guys. I have a quick question. So
Yes.
the Fed fund rate, is that the interest rate or what is that?
No, so the Fed fund rate is just like the base rate or where that fund is hitting at that 5.375. And then their actual interest rate is created on a margin. So in other words, you know, it's like 3 1/8 right now. So they create on a margin so that when a bank goes out and they lend money, it's all based on that margin of where that interest rate is. So you know how when I talk about the 10-year Treasury went from 4.1 to 3.9? Well, that's not the mortgage interest rate. That's what the mortgage interest rate is based on. That mortgage interest rate is the 3.9 plus a margin or a certain percentage, which allows myself, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac to lend money to us, which we lend to you guys. So it's all based on those margins and how that market works. The same thing goes with the Fed.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great
absolutely.
question. And Nikki,
Mhm.
honestly, I don't know that many real estate agents understand that.
Yeah, I think we could talk about that more in depth next week would be a great topic for us to discuss is what is that margin? How does it work? Why does it work the way that it does? Who's, you know, be really transparent so you have that knowledge about how mortgage interest rates really work and what they're based on and what that margin actually means.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. So everyone come back again, jam-packed full. We're at about the 20-minute mark as promised. This call is for you and the value is high and I just cannot Thank you enough, Nikki. If you have questions for her, look her up offline if you want to put your stuff in the chat, and I can put it on Workplace as well, or just shout out your number for text or calls.
Yep, phone number is 952-484-1584.
Perfect. All right, and I've got your information here. So everyone, thanks for coming. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, reach out to Nikki or I or Cari if you have any questions or if we can help in any way. Take care.
Thank you.